Well, thank you again for letting us be a part of Girl Geeks. I know we've had the event in our office a few times, and obviously this is something that fits right into our expertise, and I'm glad to really contribute. This is Matt. I'll definitely uh, have him kind of jump in on some things that I think are tied into what his team focuses on, and maybe add a little more insight into that. Obviously, we've got people we're going to be sitting down with directly, but there's there Matt and I will be here after 9 o'clock if people want to spend a little bit of time and catch up with us. Also, feel free to send us an email, give us a call. We're actually very accessible, and at the end of the day, our business and people finding jobs is a very people oriented arena. People hire individuals more so than they do a resume. And at the end of the day, that's a big part of what you're trying to do, is figure out how to get in front of the right person. And I definitely want to spend some time talking to you about some strategies that I think may help with that, and also answer any questions that people may have about the job market, what's going on out there in the tech scene, and overall, it is a really good time to look for a job. Things tend to slow down as you get towards the end of the year, and starting in January as you go through Q1, companies put projects together, they get timelines put together, and then obviously they need to hire, bring people on, and really figure out how they're going to round out those teams. So if you're looking right now, this is a good time of year to do that. So just speaking first of all about what's going on in Toronto, and some of the things to be aware of. We've seen it as far for Matt coming from San Francisco, coming into Toronto. There's a great startup scene. It seems to be continuing to grow all the time with new companies that are starting, individuals we know in the marketplace that are starting their own companies. And there seems to be a really robust ecosystem for that at this point. And it's the fourth most active startup environment in the world at this point. Again, best non-US city for startup funding. And I think that's going to only continue to grow as you have more entrepreneurs in Toronto who are taking their companies public or selling their companies and then going out and starting another company or becoming angel investors or things of that nature. So again, Toronto in particular within Canada, I'm sure no one's terribly surprised that the majority or a large percentage of the top companies in Canada are located here in Toronto. And overall, the unemployment rate is half of what it is in other Canadian cities. And I don't have the exact statistic, but I'd venture to say in technology, it's even probably half that as well. There tends to be, from what we've seen, a pretty good decrease in unemployment, particularly in the technology space. And again, it's a very young city, and I think I read something in, what was it, CNBC, that was the top city in the world for young people, which is pretty cool. So it's definitely a good place, and the sun will come out another day, I'm sure. So to give you a little background on us, as was mentioned, I've been with the company for 15 years. So I actually started with Jobspring in Atlanta, Georgia. Started out placing embedded engineers and small talk developers and all kinds of things before everything moved into .NET and Java and Ruby and whatnot. But here, technology is our focus. So we're not necessarily focused on industry. We're much more focused on technology, and really looking for opportunities where companies are looking to expand their technology and looking for ways that we can help in that arena. So we partner directly with hiring managers. So as far as our approach, we're talking directly to managers, leads, VPs, directors of companies, and really figuring out what those technology needs are, and then following up with the individuals who are helping find a job in that arena. And again, our services are free to candidates. So if you're looking for a job and would like help, please let us know, and you can get in contact with myself, Matt, or any of the recruiters here. So let's talk a little bit about what you guys are here for, which is, how do I start my job search? And we definitely want to talk about a couple areas. One, obviously, your resume, and I put LinkedIn profile next to resume, because at this point, your LinkedIn profile can be as important or maybe even more important than a resume at times. That recruiters, more often than not, are going to LinkedIn as their first approach to filling a job, more so than they might be going to Monster or different job boards. It's become a lot more of a social interaction. You're able to look at who people are connected with and kind of get a gauge of that person's background. Talk a little bit about that, but I think really paying attention to your LinkedIn profile, trying to get recommendations on your LinkedIn profile that can really help get someone's attention, and as we talked about before, get you in the door, which is a big piece of that. GitHub and is something that we see more and more as an important piece of the job search, where a company may look for a resume and their GitHub account. And Matt, I don't know if you want to talk to that.
Yeah, with open source, if you're dabbling or if you're trying to get an open source programming position, you've got to have a GitHub. I think outside of the resume, that's the first thing a manager asks for. Hey, do they have a GitHub? Can I see some repos? So if you go on there and you want to either just make sure you're following people, if there's small projects, throw them up there. It's the more the merrier kind of game with that. So if you don't have a GitHub and you're trying to get an open source job, I encourage you to set that up.
Obviously, personal websites, particularly on the design, UI, UX side of things. We see a lot of people are going to have their own websites. People want to see what you're doing. More often than not, they're looking at the portfolio more than they're looking at the resume, to the point where the portfolio is your resume on that side of things. So you really want to make sure if you don't have a website, that you're thinking about what's out there that represents you, and are you searchable, and can people find you? I think that's really, particularly on the UI UX side, more important than, say, a back-end developer would be from that perspective. Twitter, obviously, is anything in the social media realm is becoming more relevant, more important. Following certain people, you never know, you might find something posted that you can reply back to that gets you in the door, or gets you a phone call or an email as a follow-up to that. And obviously references, we want to really talk about being prepared and ready with those when that time comes as well. So again, getting back to your resume, and this might be a little harsh when we say the resume doesn't matter, but the key there is the idea of the resume is to get you in the door. The resume is going to be what someone utilizes to go through the interview. So you want to really think about what you want people to know about your background. What do you want to talk about in that interview? I see people will put everything on a resume at times, every technology they've ever read about in a book, which may get you in the door, but it also may be your Achilles heel, because the first question someone might ask is, what do you know about this? Well, I haven't really done that, but one of my colleagues was. That can be a killer question in an interview because it's on your resume. So that leads someone to start to think, well, what else is not accurate about this person's background? So when you're thinking about your resume, you really want to think about what you put onto that. You want to really think about making sure that it's going to be a good reflection of you, and it's going to catch the attention of the person that you're looking for. So the first bullet there, people look at it and they look at it quickly. When I'm looking at a resume and maybe there's 10 resumes for a job, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to look at that first page. I'm going to look at that first job, and I'm looking to get a sense of, is that person going to have the background that I'm looking for? So you really want to think about, buzzwords. We talk about this idea of buzzwords. If I'll see a resume sometimes of someone that's a really great software engineer, and we figured this out because we called them and we then met with them. And when we got through the resume, we realized, wow, you've got a lot of experience, but you didn't put a single piece of that on the resume. So most people would just look at that and move on. So you definitely want to think about what you're putting onto that in those first couple bullet points that are going to catch someone's attention. Architected, built, designed, certain adjectives that speak to what you did on that project are really important. And then you want to put technology into that. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the people that are going to look at your resume is going to be an HR manager, a recruiter like ourselves. A recruiter at that company is probably the first person that's going to look at that. And odds are they're not a technical person. So they're looking for certain buzzwords that lead them to say, I want to talk to this person. Oh, I was given a job description that says I need this, this, and this technology. So this person has it on there. I'm then going to send an email. I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to get that person a call. So if that's way, way down on your 10th bullet point, they might not get to it. They may not get to the point of reading that. Another mistake I see is someone will have worked on a lot of projects, and let's say their background is predominantly .NET. So they're mainly doing C# and ASP.NET, but the first project they put on is system administrator for that, and second one supported this, and then they get to it, but it reads as if, oh, first bullet says this, so they must be a system administrator. So I'm not going to call that person because they didn't put .NET on that. So you really want to think about, when you're thinking about the bullet points on your resume and what you're highlighting, thinking about it in the context of what I'm strongest at, what do I want people to look at, because they may not get beyond that first job. So buzzwords are really a crucial piece, and you want to use them a few times. Thinking about how search algorithms work and things of that nature. If your resume is on Monster and I put in Ruby on Rails and you happen to have put Ruby on Rails on your resume 10 times, well, you're going to go to the top. So thinking about whether you put in the bullets a couple times and then at the bottom you summarize the technology. Again, you put in your overall summary. Those are strategies on how you can get noticed and again, get your foot in the door on those sort of things. So you really want to think about those sort of things. And on the flip side of that, avoid things that aren't really your strengths. Maybe it's something you did 5 years ago and you don't really want to have that be an interview question. Well, just take it off your resume. Or it's a technology you've used, but you really don't want that to be where you take your career. If you have that on your resume, all of a sudden you're getting calls about those sort of roles. So you just want to really think about what it is you're putting into that. Talk a little bit about details and projects, even if it only took 2 weeks. Again, if that's a project that is where you want to go in your career, it's a project that you're very proud of. Add some detail to it. You want to speak to, again, the things that are important of what you did within that are going to get someone's attention, because 6 months of mobile development is enough in a lot of instances to get you a job. If you speak to the fact of built this, launched in the iStore, has this many downloads, has this rating on in Android or iOS, that's something that even though it's 6 months will get attention. So thinking about the projects you put into it and how you describe that is definitely important. I see this a lot as far as details on jobs that maybe someone did while they're in college or while they did in high school, or that isn't related to their career. You can take it off. You don't need to keep it on there. If it's volunteer work, if it's things of that nature, absolutely. That's relevant. But if you're doing a job that's outside of technology, even if it's a stopgap, you're working in technology and there's a stopgap, leave it out. You're better off having someone ask about that and say, well, I was just doing some work on the side while I was looking for a technology job, because you never know what kind of, or put in there, but don't put any details associated with it. You just don't want to put too much time into things that aren't really the way you want to go. Matt, anything else you think on the resume?
I would say just like with the technology stuff, you still want to talk about the interests. So if you're really into the mean stack and Ember, Angular, Node, but you have zero experience, just throw interest and put it in there, because we still managers want to see that you're passionate about the newest technology, that you're going to these kind of meetups, that you might be a member of the MongoDB user group. You want to have all those things and accolades in like a spot, but you just don't want it as a part of your job if you've never touched on it, because that's like the biggest turnoff for most managers. It's like, well, they said they were using Ruby on Rails here, and then they find out it was just the tech environment they were in. So but yeah, that would be the biggest thing. And then you can still put environment and list of technologies that you might have been familiar with or exposed to. But I would just have an interest section, maybe at the end, at the beginning, wherever's comfortable for you, just talking about the technologies that you're really excited about. Maybe that you just finished a book on, something like that, but just not as a part of the actual position that you have.
And I think that also goes into projects. A lot of hiring managers love people that are passionate about technology. And one of the things that shows that is something you're doing on the side. I built this on the side, and maybe it is with a new technology that you haven't worked with in the past, or set up my own Linux box and deployed this application, whatever that may be. So if you are doing things on the side, put that as projects or side projects, and definitely add that to your resume, because again, it's a talking point. It gets people interested in, wow, this person that's going above and beyond. They're not just going to come in, do the work, go home. That's going to work in some environments, but some environments are looking for someone that's kind of doing things and has that passion for technology, and being members of things like this or other meetups, I think, are definitely relevant, because it shows an interest in learning and getting better. So talking a little bit about the aspects of going out and finding a job, there's a lot of different ways that you can go to. Once you have your resume, what do I do with it? I now have my resume. How do I go about finding a job? There's a lot of different approaches other than Monster, Workopolis, the standard job boards that are out there. You definitely want to think before you're putting your resume onto Monster and Workopolis about how many calls and emails you want to get. You may even want to, if you think you're going to get a lot of them and you don't want to blow up your cell phone, you might even want to grab a cell phone with a certain number of minutes and put that number on your resume, just so your personal cell phone's not getting calls constantly from recruiters, everyone else under the sun. That's one thing. It just depends on how many calls and contacts you're going to get. You may want to set up a separate email that is your name, jobs at whatever. That's where everyone who contacts you about jobs, that's where it's going to go. Again, for that same reason, in the event, maybe someone picks up your email address on a spam filter, whatever that may be, but also just the number of emails you may get as a byproduct of that. Just have a little bit of an idea of how you want to get your information out there before you decide to put it out there. Because I've definitely seen people put a resume up and then take it down within 2 days because they just got so many calls they couldn't even answer their voicemails at that point. So beyond that, we definitely see a lot of different approaches to going out. These are some other job boards that maybe aren't as well known: GitHub Jobs, Stack Exchange. Obviously, everyone here knows Kijiji, Crunchbase, LinkedIn. There's Startup TO is another one where we see that's pretty common. And you definitely want to go out and look at the jobs that you think are appropriate and apply to those. And you definitely want to get your resume to places that you think are going to be relevant with that. The key here is you need to be proactive. So if you apply to something that you think is a relevant opportunity for you, you definitely want to, and you don't hear back from that, there's nothing wrong with a follow-up call to the HR or to the recruiter, or if it's directly to the manager at the company, just following up and saying, hey, I know I'd sent your resume, just wanted to reach out and let you know that I'm really interested in the job and definitely feel like I'm qualified for the position and would love to talk with you a little bit about my credentials. No one's going to fault you for being proactive. If you call them every day for 2 weeks, that might be a problem. But being proactive and following up on something, because you never know. I mean, maybe it's a perfect job for you and it just got lost in the shuffle. I know it's happened to me where there's someone that, misplaced, whatever it may be, and they follow up with a phone call and I've ended up hiring that person because it was that aspect of being proactive that I really liked about that individual, and I felt like that was someone that I'd enjoy working with. So thinking about how you want to do that and what's appropriate with that. Again, I think it depends on what's out there for the posting and what's in the public forum. If it speaks directly to who that person is, then I think it's easy to send an email or follow up with a phone call. If it's LinkedIn, you can obviously send them a message directly through LinkedIn or connect with that person is never a bad thing. If you're in LinkedIn, you can connect with the hiring manager, and once you're connected, you can send a message to that person. You can find them on Twitter and message them directly as well. But just not settling for just sending your resume out to a lot of places and waiting to hear back, I think is really important. So again, I talked a little bit about the job board, and at times it could lead to being inundated with calls. So you just want to really think about how you go about that, and on this, a lot of the things you're going to hear about may or may not be relevant for you. So just really thinking about what you put out there before you do that. Sometimes you're better off with the approach of applying to things that you're interested in, at least initially. If you're not getting the type of traction that you'd like, then putting it up on a job board, but not necessarily thinking of that as your first approach, is just putting it out there and waiting to hear back, because it may or may not garner you the response that you're looking for. So this is our personal belief. Everyone may have had different experiences, but at the end of the day, going back to people are hiring you, and if you're working with a recruiter and you choose to work with a recruiter, meet with them. They're representing you, and there has to be an aspect of them knowing who you are when they're speaking to a company, or when a company says, not really sure they're a fit, or their resume doesn't exactly fit everything I'm looking for. If that individual or us has met with you, we're going to have a little more feedback to give back to that, or willingness to push by saying, hey, we've met with this person and you really need to sit down with them. So be careful of the places that you're not going to meet with. Be careful of places that are just going to send your resume out, because it at times can do more harm than good if they're going to send your resume but can't deliver interviews, because now your resume is there, and that might limit your ability to get in front of that person. So you definitely want them to have certain relationships, and you shouldn't have a recruiter that sends your resume out without telling you who they're sending it to. Again, it might be a company you have a relationship with that you've already sent your resume to through a friend or another avenue. So just those are things that you want to be aware of when you're going out. And at the end of the day, once you've interacted with recruiters, you generally probably want to work with 2 or 3 at the high end of that. Individuals that you've met with and you trust and you feel like are going to go out and market you the way that you want to. And same sort when I'm talking about transparency, that's what I'm speaking to, is that aspect of knowing what they're doing with your background. It's your job search. You should know where your resume is going. You should know where people are taking your information as well. I talk about this idea of being transparent as well. If that person is going out and working to help you find a job, you want them to know what's going on in your job search. Example of this recently, where we found an individual a job, got him a good salary, and he was happy. He was making 5% or 7% more than what he is at his last job. But he definitely would have made more if he would have given us one key piece of information, which was that he had gotten another offer that was $5,000 more than the offer we got Primarily because both companies wanted to hire him. If we turned around and said, by the way, just got an offer for 105, can you guys match that? The answer is almost always yes. We found that out afterwards, and he took the job and he's happy. But that's an example of where transparency can help you. And when you're thinking about going through your job search and you're thinking about how you utilize information to move a process along quickly or get the best offer you can, information is going to help you. Because if you go on one interview and then you go on 2 other interviews and everyone knows about those other interviews and that company really likes you, well, they're probably going to move more quickly, which means they'll interview less people because they don't have as much time to do as many first-round interviews. If you have other offers on the table, and they really want to hire you, that's information that you're using that's going to benefit you by getting you hopefully higher offers at that company as well. At the end of the day, it's you're using information to get what you want out of that interaction. So that's just a word of advice on how you go about and who you interact with in your job search.
Say one thing on that note: make sure do like an Excel sheet and put track everywhere that either a recruiter sent your resume, you personally have applied, because there's nothing worse than the double submission, where if some random recruiter spoke to you, he sent your resume and you maybe didn't know about it, and then I go and try to send your resume. Some managers won't want to deal with the double submission, so they just won't consider you as a candidate. So it actually can do more harm than good. So just, if you're working with multiple recruiters as well as your own search, just be diligent. Make sure that you're going through and typing in exactly the date that it was submitted, because a lot of times we can't resubmit you if you applied 6 months ago, something like that. So just make sure to track all that, just so that if you are working with a recruiter, that they already know where we can't go and submit on your behalf.
And before I get into this, because I realized just now that we don't really have anything speaking to LinkedIn in particular, is everyone here pretty active in LinkedIn? Would you guys say? So first of all, your LinkedIn profile, a good rule of thumb is make your LinkedIn profile look very much like your resume. Think about your resume and add bullet points that make it searchable, make it so people can find your information. Because you might be approached about a job, maybe you're not looking, but you could be approached about a job with another company that could be exactly what you're looking for. So your LinkedIn profile is basically your active resume that's out there. So you want to go in, you want to look at the jobs, you want to really look at the bullet points, you want it to represent you in a certain light, and particularly the last couple jobs. So when you're thinking about your resume or you're thinking about your LinkedIn profile, your most recent job should be the one with the most information, and then it should decrease the further back it goes, because technology changes so quickly that people don't care as much about what you did 5 years ago as they do what you've done in the last 2 or 3 years ago, or last 2 or 3 years. So you definitely want to spend more time on the more recent things. Other thing you want to think about within LinkedIn is you definitely want to spend some time and connect with people. If you're starting your job search, who do you know? Who have you worked with in the past? Where did they go? Are you connected with that person? It's a great way to find references. A lot of times we'll talk to candidates and ask about references like, well, I lost touch with this person. LinkedIn's a great tool for reconnecting with references. And another thing you definitely want to think about is asking for people to give you recommendations. You can actually, if you're connected with people, you can go into LinkedIn and you can actually request a recommendation directly from people. And again, it's marketing yourself. Right underneath there, it's someone that wrote up a recommendation for you. And again, it can get attention and get people to reach out and contact you. So you really want to think about LinkedIn as a crucial aspect of your job search strategy. I can tell you that as a company, going back 3 years ago, the amount of our marketing dollars that were spent were predominantly on job boards like Monster, in the US, Dice, and Career Builder. That has really completely shifted away from that to LinkedIn being our number one area where we spend money from a recruiting standpoint. And in fact, more often than not, when we open a new account, we're obviously connecting with the people that we know, but if we're going to find people for that job, we're more likely to get on LinkedIn than we are to jump on Monsterboard or Workopolis as far as reaching out and finding people. So you definitely want to realize that that's a pretty important piece of the current marketplace and how people are going to find you. And that's not just us. That's every recruiter in every company is going to utilize LinkedIn pretty heavily. So let's talk a little bit about what to expect in interviews. And what time is it, Matt? Just so. Okay, great. Depends obviously on who you're talking to. First of all, before you go to interviews, there's a couple things you can go out. If you go into Google, you can Google interview questions. You can go into .NET interview questions. There's a lot of sample interview questions out there that might be helpful. I know for a lot of people that haven't looked for a job in a while or they haven't done an interview in 3 years, how do you prepare for those interviews? That can be a good tool or a good way to go out and kind of get a sense of what people might ask. Read through your resume. We sit down and meet with everyone that we represent. It's not unusual where I'll sit down with someone and say, tell me what you did here. And they flip the resume around and they're starting to read what they wrote because they don't remember. It was 2-3 years ago and they haven't thought about the fact they went in, grabbed their resume, they added their most recent job, but really didn't look at anything that they did or wrote in the last go around. You really want to think about everything on your resume that someone may ask a question about. So if there's some specific technologies that you haven't touched in 2 years, but you were working with it heavily, you want to definitely go back and study that a little bit. Study questions that people may ask. Make sure that you can speak to that. Because again, those are some of those things that can cause issues in an interview is someone asks you about that and like, I don't really remember exactly. Let me think back. That could be the difference between getting an interview or getting a job and not getting a job. And while I'm on that topic, be very, very careful of putting things on your resume that are something the team did, not what you did. That's a common feedback we'll get from clients on why maybe they're not moving forward with someone is spent 30 minutes and I never really got a sense of what they did. On every question I asked, they said, well, as a team, we did this, and the team did this. And what does someone walk away from that? Well, they didn't do any of it, but the team really did a good job. So you really want to think about what you did, and you can speak about what the team did. Well, we built this application, but let me tell you what I did within that. Okay, so when you're thinking about your resume and what you're putting into it, you really want to focus on the things that you can speak to and that are going to emphasize that, and be really careful of when you get into the hiring manager. Sometimes the right answer is I don't know, and that's another quick way for people not to get a job is if a manager feels like someone's trying to BS them. They're trying to make it up as they go and spending, that creates a dynamic where someone says, well, I thought they were really good, but I'm afraid that if I asked them to do something, they didn't know how to do it, they'd just try it anyway. They wouldn't say, I don't know, but I'll go figure it out. So when we're talking about the two different people that you're going to interact with, if your first point of contact a lot of times is going to be an internal recruiter or a gatekeeper, if you're working with a recruiting firm, that a lot of times won't be the case where that first point of contact will be directly with a hiring manager. But with a company, that's going to be the case. And most of the time, they're not going to be technical. Some will have been in the industry for a long time and have a good knowledge of technology, but they're not going to be able to get deep. So it's going to be either questions that they've been presented by the technical team that they're being asked to ask. They're going to be much more interpersonal skills. Is this person going to fit in our environment? Are they going to be a good match with us? And so it could be more just general questions. Things when you're meeting with HR or a gatekeeper that will kill you are showing up late, not being prepared for the interview, not, just carrying yourself in a way, smiling, being upbeat, being someone that they'd want to interact with. I've definitely had clients that I've worked with where they've met with the HR manager and that person didn't like them. They just walked them out the door. They never even got to the technical interview. So trying to, things that you can look, again, LinkedIn's a great tool for this. If you can find that person on LinkedIn, you can connect with them before the interview, look at their interests. Maybe there's some interest. Maybe they went to the same school. Maybe they worked with someone that you worked with in the past. Think anything where you can find a commonality with people is going to make the interview more enjoyable. It's going to make it easier, and it's going to create comfort where you're getting past to that next step. When we're dealing with the hiring manager or the lead developer, again, sometimes the first interview is not technical, and it's tell me about what you did. And I've definitely had people walk out and say, well, it wasn't a technical interview. Well, it wasn't technical in the sense that they were asking very detailed technical questions. It was technical in the sense of, could you explain what you did? Was it clear? Did they understand what the projects were? Did they understand what you did? Did they get a sense of what you were excited about or proud of while you're working in that job? Those are some, again, reading your resume and being able to speak to that. They, in their sense, that it was technical because they're asking you to describe what you did. And do they understand what that was? Or did they ask one question and you spoke for 30 minutes about it? Can you be direct? Can you provide a direct answer to a direct question? If they sit down with you and talk about a project and ask questions, is it going to be a 30-minute conversation when it should have been a 5-minute conversation? So those are some of the things that people are looking for in that first, what we might call a non-technical interview, where they're not drilling down into certain components of a technology, and it is more of a broad, tell me about yourself sort of dynamic. Same sort of thing, link in with the hiring manager before the interview. You should have their email a lot of times, or you can find them and connect with them. It's most email addresses at a company are either first name dot last name at the company. Let's say you're set up on an interview and it's the recruiter that's setting that up. You can take whatever the naming function of that is, and you can apply that to the manager's name and go find them in LinkedIn, connect with them. Again, look for commonality, look for their background, understand what they do. And if you Google a person's name and type in their name in LinkedIn, a lot of times their profile will come up. So that's another way to just get a little background. You need to study not only your resume and your technology, but you need to study the company. And side note, please look at the company's website. Please look at the company's website. That will automatically show that you don't care and you're not interested. And a lot of people that were very qualified for a job didn't get a job because they didn't look at the company's website. What do you know about us? I didn't have enough time to do that. I'm sorry. And this person's thinking, well, I just put 30 minutes of my time aside to meet with you, and you didn't have 3 minutes to look us up or look at the job description. So make sure that you put time aside and think of that interview as something that's important. Again, a lot of the reason people are going to hire is do they feel like you're going to fit the team? Is there a comfort level? Are they able to just speak with you? And again, the more information you can have, the easier sometimes that can be. Look around at pictures on the desk. If you see a picture of that person and they're fishing, or they're with their 2 kids, or they're sailing, and there's something that correlates to you, bring it up. Speak about it. Again, that's going to be that comfort level that you can speak to. And never be negative. Think if you had a negative experience at your last job, think about how you can frame that in a non-negative way, which doesn't put you in a negative light, doesn't put the company in a negative light. But if your last 3 reasons for leaving a job is, well, he was a jerk and she did this and this person did that, what's that person thinking? Well, what are they going to say about me when they leave here? So you need to really think about those sort of things before getting into that. Anything else you'd mention on the interview side, Matt?
I'd say just so many of these companies have a blog, have a video, have some kind of something online where it's easy for you to take away a lot of info. So just when you're looking around for products, we actually have a couple partnerships with HR, and I've had a couple really strong candidates submitted. And the first question is, what are our three main products? They don't know them into the interview. So just making sure that you have a grasp. Talk to your recruiter if you're using one. Hey, so is this person going to be asking me a lot of detailed questions about my background? Are they going to be asking or expecting me to know a lot about the company? Because a lot of times your recruiter is going to know. I know which accounts my HR might grill you, or the tech manager might just want to hear more about kind of your programming background, how you got into it. So while you're researching the company, just try to come up with a couple detailed questions that you actually care about, maybe about their technology, why they're using this tool for that, those kind of things. But just something to get the other person engaged and kind of show that you actually care and are interested in that company, I think goes a long way.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I've definitely had clients that said, well, they didn't ask me any questions, so I'm not interested. Taking the time to prepare questions, or even having looked at the website and say, hey, I saw this and I really think that this is something I could improve on, or I saw this problem and it came up. I've even had people come in with like, hey, I came up with a solution last night that I coded for this, and people are like blown away that people would take that initiative. So, it is, there's definitely some things you can do that will put you in an advantage over a lot of people in the marketplace. And the more that you can do on those sort of things, and the easy things while you're sitting at home, watching whatever TV show you might be watching with a computer on your lap, preparing for that interview, jotting some notes down will go a long way. Again, we definitely see things move very quickly in the marketplace. On average, I'd say most companies are going to do 2 to 3 rounds of interviews, except for Amazon. They do like 12. So if you're in process with them and you're on your 4th interview, I talked to someone yesterday, they did 11 rounds and didn't get the job. So just know that it's a long process with Amazon. But most other companies, it's going to be 2 or 3 rounds of interviews is going to be kind of the norm with those individuals. We've seen technology tests, probably less than 50-50 now as we're getting more into the marketplace. But there's definitely companies that give tests and certain companies that don't, but there's always going to be a technical component to that interview. And on average, if a company is at the point where they're ready to make a decision, it's going to be a 5 to 10-day period. I know probably the most frustrating thing of looking for a job is not hearing back. It's okay to send an email and follow up on things. Some people are really afraid to give bad news and they choose just not to, which I don't really understand. But if you're not hearing back from someone, you probably know where that's going. But sometimes that's not the case. It just, when we don't hear back, it usually means someone is afraid to tell us no. So, always send a thank you letter. If you actually go to our signatures there, we have a blog with some sample thank you letters. I've had people definitely get jobs because of thank you letters. I've also had people not get jobs because of thank you letters, because they write a thank you letter that says, thank you for meeting me. And that's it. Or they have spelling errors or syntax errors or things of that nature. So beyond sending a thank you letter, please send it to someone you trust and have them read it. We all make mistakes, spell check, things of those nature. It should be formal. You should speak to the fact that you thanking them for the interview, why you're qualified for the job, and kind of any other questions that they have. But
I'd say too, make sure it's not intimidating. I've actually had a kid accidentally send the wrong thank you letter to the wrong manager. So just thank you letters need to be obviously genuine, detailed. Hopefully each company you're excited about different things, but if you're going to do a thank you letter, make sure that you
and you pull things from the interview that you should have 2 or 3 bullet points on. Hey, I know that you have this problem, and I definitely feel like here's why I'd be a good solution for that, or here's why I think I can solve that problem for you, but speaks to the fact that you're listening and taking notes and actually interested in what they're doing. As you said, the form letter is not as good. And I'll kind of skip that last point because so where to go from here? We make this first point. Probably should know what's out there. Google yourself. Just most of us know that there's not things out there, but you never know. It doesn't hurt to type your name into Google and see what pops up. Make sure that anything that's in social media that you wouldn't want people to know that is not accessible, and that you hide those sort of things because people will go in and look you up. So you should know what's going to pop up. We talked about that idea of side projects. Donate your time. I know Girl Geeks has some things that they're involved in. Find ways that you can give back to the community. Those things will go, and definitely put those onto your resume. They're absolutely going to be helpful as not only on your resume, but you never know who you're going to meet. Could be someone that you interact with that you end up getting a job with. Think about who you want to work for. Think about the companies that you're excited about working with. Think about companies that directly compete with the last company you worked for, or the company before that. Think about your ex-colleagues that left this company. Where did they go? Are those companies that you've applied to? Have you reached out to them and said, "Hey, I'd like to work with you again"? But really thinking about having some level of strategy on how you're going about that. And again, make sure you do the research and prepare questions and are ready for those interviews. There's a lot of great people that don't get hired, not because they're not qualified, but just because they didn't put the time in to be ready for that interview. On a side note, I've had a lot of people take jobs with great companies that their first pass at the company they weren't interested in. Whether it was because of a website, whether it was, it's not my exact location. When you're looking for a job, you should go on every interview you can that you're not 100% sure you're not interested in. In fact, you should probably go on every one that you can, because again, it might be practice for that job you really want, and they nail you on a question that you don't get, but you go home, you study that, and you're more prepared for the next one. You might meet someone that you end up working for 3-4 years down the road. Think of every interview as a networking event, as an opportunity to meet great people in the technology space that are out there. And you know what? I've had people walk out of it and it's like, geez, I didn't think this was it, but I want to work. I want that job. I'd love to work for these guys. You know, just like people aren't great at marketing themselves, sometimes companies don't do a good job marketing themselves. So don't base it on what someone else tells you. Don't base it on what you read online. Go figure it out for yourself and make your own determinations on that particular company. Well, this is a sample resume. We can actually put something out as kind of a sample that people can look at as far as how to put together a resume. I went to the eye doctor and really need glasses, so this is really hard for me. I lost them some point between here and Washington D.C. and finally decided to go back. So within this, again, we want to set it up on. I really need help, Matt.
I think really for the main thing that we're going to talk about is obviously depending on years of experience. If it's relatable to the job that you're trying to get and you have over 10 years, it's really important the way that you structure it. I think the objective aspect, that's probably more for our industry, like sales, marketing, still put it in there. But I think then getting straight into whether you want to have the skill sets right after that in terms of your experience. Some people I see create like a bar chart. This technology I am 5 stars, confident with. All of that is completely up to you. But I think making sure that you're not doing paragraphs when you're going to the bullet points. Be as direct as possible. Because I think even when you meet recruiters, like Dane said, we're not technical. We don't try to be. So the easier you can make it for us to really pick out exactly what you did and be like, oh, I have a client that's looking for somebody that can do HTML5, email, newsletters. If you can dumb it down and make it as direct as possible, not only the recruiter but the managers too. They're not reading the paragraphs. So just less is more for sure. If you worked on a site that scaled out to 20 million users, that should absolutely be one of the first bullet points. That's like the most sought after thing right now is people who can do optimization, scalability. So those are the buzzwords that I myself am looking for when I flip over a resume. And one position, you know, if you've been in that role for 10 years, then sure, it should take like 3/4 of a page. But for the most part, 2-3 years, I mean, it really shouldn't be more than like a third of the total page. Because really, you know, they're just kind of going through the resume, looking at the skill sets. How long did this person stay at this job? Are they a job hopper? Was there a 3-year gap? So less is more for sure. Don't worry about all the colors, fonts. I mean, if you're a UI UX person, then yes, do worry about it. But otherwise, it's definitely just trying to be as, I guess, articulate as you can in as few words as possible. And try to make it, you know, as sexy and as attractive as possible. If you feel like the project you did wasn't that exciting and it was maybe an internal tool or something, definitely chat with either previous coworkers. There's resumes for days online. You can probably see somebody else who came out of your company, how they did it. Call a recruiter. I have a stack of resumes I could go over with you. But definitely, I mean, play around with a couple different templates. I've seen, you know, somebody who's going after a Java role and a PHP role have separate resumes. But definitely, I'll be here afterwards if you have more detailed questions. But there's lots of material online too.
Yeah. And I think the big thing is you made a key point. Don't make it a paragraph. That will people will run the other way from those. And should never be more than 3 pages, and ideally try to keep it to 2. I've seen 34-page resumes. Yeah. We don't read those. And again, I can put this online rather than going through this with everybody. But thanks for having us. We'll be around, obviously, for those that we're going to sit down directly with. And if you want to find Matt, myself, or any of the other recruiters directly, we'll be around. So thank you.